So my name is Chris Bollegar. I'm the rector of Holy Trinity Anglican Church in Broomfield. I've been there for a little over 6 years. Prior to that, I was an assistant to Father Jerry Schnackenberg in a family of Anglican churches called Epiphany. And I served in various locations throughout the Epiphany family. How many of you know Father Jerry that are here? Okay. So I was with him for a while. Before that, I served at a church in Denver, actually off of Colfax. I was there for 3 years, a youth pastor, and then a pastor's non-denominational church. And then I made the journey into Anglicanism after that. I am married. My wife is here this evening, Allison. We have 3 children. And I'm on the board of CAS and thankful to serve in this capacity. This evening I do want to begin to do what Ken spoke of, introducing sacraments and sacramental theology, and specifically with a focus on baptism, but there's one particular area I want to talk about. So by no means is this going to be an exhaustive I don't know that I could do that in 50 minutes. I just don't know enough to narrow it down to 50 minutes. But so it's not going to be a comprehensive study of sacramental thinking or theology or even baptism itself. I want to try to gather our thoughts and direct us as we move through this to really, there's one particular area, and I want to ask some questions on the front end to see how I'm going to do this. So how many of you are cradle Episcopalians? Okay, so the rest of you, I'm assuming, have converted to Anglicanism. How many of you have converted to Anglicanism from another tradition? Is that the rest of you? Anybody, your introduction to Christianity, you weren't a cradle Episcopalian, you weren't baptized as an infant, but you were actually converted and you came into the Anglican Church as an adult. Anyone? All right, we have one, Jeannie. All right, wonderful. Okay, that's what I thought, and that's good because that's what I wanted to focus on. So let me ask a few questions here. How many of you were? Well, I assume all of you have been baptized, and this isn't a plea to warm up the waters here and baptize if you haven't been. How many of you were baptized as an infant? Okay. How many of you have been baptized more than once? Okay. More than twice. Anyone? All right. How many of you were fully immersed? You went all the way. Okay. Was that in an Anglican church, Baptist church? Anglican. Nice. Non-denominational church. All right. Pentecostal. Wonderful. Were you baptized forward? Hey, has anybody ever been baptized like face first? Anybody done that? No? Sprinkled. Anybody sprinkled? Okay. Poured? Anybody had water just poured over your head? All right. Anyone like the Orthodox, where they actually, or even in the early church, where they take you down to nothing but what you were born in and baptize you? I doubt anybody's experienced that, right? No. Okay. We haven't had that experience. Yeah, I wouldn't know how to address that anyway, so that's probably good. So there's talk, certainly, if you've kept up with religion in America, I'll narrow it to that. And we talk about being or living in or coming into a post-Christian culture. It's a language that's being adopted by all kinds of different people. And it seems to me that the category is, though it's true, there's something that's actually, the truth isn't quite specific enough, because it's not just that we're moving to a post-Christian culture. Here in America, we're moving into a post-Protestant culture. America is predominantly, and has been predominantly, Protestant. And that makes it all the more interesting what's happening as we see a generation, 2 generations, separated from mainline Protestant Christianity. And it brings with it a certain kind of experience that I think we are recognizing, that's testified to in this room in virtually every church that's a part of the Anglican Mission or the ACNA or any of these liturgically, sacramentally oriented churches, is you have people typically from evangelical, Baptist, Reformed, Pentecostal backgrounds that are moving to liturgical sacramental churches. And there are all kinds of reasons that people speculate about this. I'll offer mine and set it alongside others. And I think it has a lot to do with this post-Protestant culture that mainline Protestantism is built, it still is, built upon an understanding of religion as experience, as personal experience. And everything comes out of our experience. Our doctrine, everything is tied back to our experience. And it seems to me that that lasts only so long, that our own subjectivity, our own sense of ourself is only strong for a certain amount of time. It can only hold the weight of our lives, of our experience for so long before people want to reach out for something outside of themselves. They want something objective. And that's what I've experienced as a rector and as a convert to Anglicanism myself personally, is I was attracted to the objectivity of the sacraments, that they were actually something outside of me, and to some very real degree, it's something that God is doing quite apart from me. I have my role to play, and so do you, but God's actually active in these things, and I can hold on to it. There have been many times in my priesthood coming into the Anglican Church where I have come in on Sunday morning, and I'm the first one that gets into church, and whether my faith is weak or seemingly absent, whatever the case may be, as I come in and we have a small little bowl that's with blessed water, and I come in and I dip my fingers in that and I make the sign of the cross, and my only appeal, I have nothing, I genuinely have nothing to appeal to when I look inward. When I consider my own interiority, my own state at the moment, I have nothing. And I appeal as I do that to the promises of God made in baptism. And at times it feels like, and there have been times when I don't even feel like I'm holding on anymore. And my hope, if there's any that exist, is in what God has given in and through baptism. And there's something deeply attractive about that. There's something that we need as human beings. The reformer John Calvin, this was his whole theory of sacraments, as I understand it, is God's accommodation to our human frailty and weakness. He's accommodating the fact that we are made of dust, and that we need sometimes to taste the promise. Sometimes we need to remember not how great our faith was. I was one of those who were baptized multiple times, and it was based upon the premise that the whole theory or idea of baptism in the particular tradition I was in is built upon the genuineness of one's faith. This is a declaration of my confession and profession to follow Christ. And so when you find later on in your life that maybe you weren't quite as sincere as you are later in life, what you did in that original baptism can be called into question. And a sacramental, liturgically oriented church and faith and theology, in some sense, provides an alternative to that. To say that God marks us, He names us, and my appeal is to simply to that alone, that I remember I got wet. And not just because I got wet, but because God attaches to the water His promise. And that's the key, is that the promise is present, and God accommodates our weakness and our humanity by us getting wet, by oil being placed on our foreheads, by bread being chewed and wine being drunk. That's how we remember the promises of God. So really this evening I want to look at three simple things, and it's the last one that is my focus. The first is, what's the foundation? What is the foundation of sacramental thinking? Why are we Anglicans? And what does it mean to say that we believe in sacraments? The language of sacraments, as opposed to what some traditions call ordinances or just commands of God. God told us to do this, so we do it. Sacramental understanding goes a bit beyond that. It certainly doesn't deny that, but it goes beyond that to say there's something more that's taking place in a sacrament. What is that? What is that more? How do we define sacrament? And this is where offer your answers. If someone were to come to you and say, what is a sacrament? What would be your answer? Anybody brave enough to attempt here?
I think it's remembering.
Okay, remembering. Remembering what?
Remembering what it's all about, remembering we're coming to Christ every time we come up and take the bread and wine.
Very good. Yeah, this whole idea of anamnesis, or it really is this ancient idea of memory, not just remembering something past, but it's bringing something that happened into the very present. So absolutely, do this in remembrance of me, sometimes we'll see on the altar or the table. So absolutely, that's a part of it. What else?
I think of it as a symbol that is pointing to something that's spiritual. So a tangible symbol of something that's spiritual.
Very good. That's almost verbatim what St. Augustine says, that it's this outward and visible sign or symbol of an inward and spiritual grace. It's the answer to the question in our catechism. If you all in the ACNA, the new Anglican Catechism to be a Christian, if anybody's seen this, the question, what is a sacrament? Number 102, a sacrament is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. In the prayer book, in the catechism that you find there, and even in the 39 articles on the sacraments, it's virtually the same language. And this is what the Western Church has picked up for centuries to define what a sacrament is. There's something external, and it's a sign and symbol that communicates to us that which it symbolizes. It doesn't just simply point to that which is external to it, but the sign itself carries with it the reality. So when we eat in some mysterious way, we are not just partaking of bread and wine, but the very body and blood of Christ. And when we are baptized, it's not only a symbol of washing, but it is washing itself. The promise of God makes it real. And that is our faith. That's what we believe. Jesus, well, actually, let me say this. Anybody have your Bible? First, if somebody would read 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse number 16. 1 Timothy 3, verse 16. Who would read that for us? If you get it, you can just read it. Just read it loud enough where we can hear. Actually, am I screwing this up for the video? All right. We'll edit that out. All right. Who wants to read that? Anyone?
This is from the New Living Translation.
Okay.
Without question, this is the great mystery of our faith. Christ appeared in the flesh and was shown to be righteous by the Spirit. He was seen by angels and was announced to the nations. He was believed on in the world and was taken up into heaven.
This is the great mystery of our faith. We say this in the Eucharist, right? The mystery of our faith. Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again. Mystery, this word mystery, mysterion, in the New Testament, in the Greek. This is where we actually get our word sacrament from. As the church moved out into the Latin world, into the Roman world, they were looking for some type of word that would communicate this mysterion. And what word did they choose? They chose the word sacramentum, which is a word that we see used with, even with Roman soldiers, in the sense of making an oath. They're pledging themselves, their life, their blood, to the service of Rome. And sacramentum was the word that was picked up from the Latin world in order to communicate what we read in the New Testament, mysterion. So in the Greek Orthodox churches, they still talk about, not sacraments, but they talk about the mysteries of the faith, because they're still using that same language. And us following the Western tradition, we use the word sacraments. We mean the same thing. This is where it comes from, though, and this is the heart of sacramental teaching, and it is Jesus. There's one sacrament, and it's Jesus. We talk about, if there's a debate, is there 2 sacraments or 7 sacraments or however many sacraments, and that's an okay discussion. But there's one sacrament, and his name is Jesus. Jesus is the mystery, the sacrament that is for all of us. So the incarnation, there are different ways to view the incarnation, but this is the basis of our sacramental understanding, is that God became flesh. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and then the Word became flesh. And it doesn't seem to me just, God creates the world, and we mess up, we fall. God needs to figure out a plan to recover creation, recover humanity, and so he decides to send his Son. It seems that if we back up, and this is where theologians love to speculate on all these things, but there's something very rich about this, that it's not just an afterthought, but God in creating designed creation itself to be the vehicle by which he would communicate his very identity. And the pinnacle of that is his own image. That humanity was created for the purpose of embodying God, incarnation. This is the great sacrament. It's Jesus. He came and he dwelt in flesh. And so now to touch that flesh, to have access to that heavenly flesh, is salvation itself. It is a joining of heaven and earth. This is what sacraments are. Is that which we see at the very end of our scriptures, where heaven comes down to join earth. This is where the unveiling, the apocalypse, the pulling back of the veil, where we see what sacraments have been pointing to all along. You can think of it, if you like C.S. Lewis, it's the cupboard, it's the wardrobe by which you enter into a new world. That's sacrament, and it is always the flesh of Christ. It's always that. When he died, Paul uses this imagery of the law in Ephesians 2 being torn, rent through his flesh. And this is what we partake of. It's divinity and humanity. It's God and creation coming together. That's the heart of sacramental teaching. And so when Jesus promises his Spirit to his church, the church then derives its own sacramentality from the gift of Jesus by the Spirit. And so then the church just says the reason we have these things called sacraments is because Jesus became a human being. And by his Spirit we now offer that which he did in the incarnation, grace. Grace and truth. The law came through Moses, but grace and truth came through Christ. And so the church says we have a sacramental life, not just because it's taught in Scripture, but because our God entered into history and became a human being. And now all creation, not only like the psalmist says, does the creation speak forth from day to night, it speaks forth the glory of God, but now through the incarnation, it all is infused, as we sang, with the very fire of God, that his presence is there. And so we are led into and through discipleship to see and to hear that very reality. This is the heart, as I understand it, of sacramental teaching. So when we move to baptism, one could expect, based on this, that as Ephesians says, there's one Lord, one faith. What's the next part? Does anybody remember? This is Ephesians 4. One baptism. There's one baptism. The baptism of Jesus. It's always Jesus. There's one baptism, and it's the baptism of Jesus. And all of our baptisms are simply participations in the baptism of Jesus. And you can take this for anything. Think about the new birth. We talk about being born again, especially as evangelical Anglicans, this idea of the new birth. Well, there's one new birth, and it's a new birth by the Spirit, and it's virginally conceived. And it's when the Spirit hovers over and creates new life, brings forth new life. And it's our participation in that. This is sacramental thinking. This is what, in my mind, the Anglican and the Catholic faith, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, offers to us. And it's a great, wonderful gift of objectivity of our faith, the promises of God that are given to us. So there's one Lord, one faith, one baptism. But what is it that we are given? I said at the beginning that this post-Protestant culture, particularly those that are still meandering about in our world, we're haunted by the presence of God, but not being able to find a home, and people begin to migrate into these places where they feel something bigger than themselves, something more ancient, something that puts them in touch with something divine that they haven't found in other religious expressions. And it seems to me that this isn't just simply a search for mystery. We talk about that the Anglican Church, we have mystery, we have something distinctive to offer in our world. That's true. But it's not without content, because it's Jesus that is communicated. What we're given in baptism is unity, union in his death and in his resurrection. And so when we are initiated into the church, we are initiated in this act of death. It is an extremely violent image if you think about baptism. It's quite, the first Ash Wednesday service I ever attended, I didn't even know what Ash Wednesday was. And we walked into this Anglican church, and this was, I don't know, 8 years ago, maybe 7, 8 years ago. And we were late, and so we were sitting on the front, which made me a little uncomfortable because everybody, like I do now, I've accommodated being Anglican. I sit in the back, and but then I got late, so I had to sit up front, and I'm not comfortable and not sure when everybody's standing and sitting and kneeling, and you're looking to see what everybody's doing. And it gets time for the priest to apply the ashes, and our 2 youngest boys were there. Now I remember our middle at the time was probably 4 or 5. And I remember I was getting in line, and I'd never experienced this ritual, and I could hear as we got closer the priest saying, "From dust you came, and to dust you shall return," and people leaving with this big mark on their foreheads of a cross. And I thought, man, this is like dark. He's 4. And we're telling you, you're going to die, This is what you've come to tonight. I'm all excited to go to this Anglican church, and here I'm like, telling my kids, we're going up to, you're going to die. That's what the service is. It reminds you that you're going to die. And now as a priest, having done it, and particularly to infants, and as parents will bring their infants, and to apply ash to an infant is an extremely powerful image. It's a powerful rite and ritual, and baptism communicates the same reality. The initiation into the church is death. Now, I haven't heard what Ken's preparations are for leading people journeying to the font, but it is a journey, and there definitely needs to be preparation, because that's what's happening. You're dying. You're uniting yourself to the death of a Jewish rabbi who lived 2,000 years ago, that we believe something profoundly unique happened in his death and in his resurrection. And we're united to death. And I could take all, we say the 2 sacraments of the gospel, baptism and the Lord's Supper, and then the 5 otherwise called sacraments. However we rank those, every one of them, the classical 7 sacraments in the Western tradition, all of them are an encounter with death. Each one of them. You're baptized into the death of Christ. Confirmation, this other rite of initiation, you are given the rite. And in the old rite, the bishop actually slapped the person to remind them that you're going to be persecuted. You're now a martyr. You're now a witness to the faith. This is the descent of the Spirit. You are no longer your own. You're a witness. You're a martyr for Christ. The initiation to the table, what are we doing when we come to the table? But proclaiming, as Paul says, we're setting forth the death of Christ. Holy orders. Holy orders is this. Have you ever seen a deacon get ordained? What do? They lay on their face, and you're like this. I know in mine, I was like, come on, man. You get, my shoulders are falling asleep. You are prostrate for, I don't know how long it was, 15 minutes? It felt like it was forever. And you are completely laid before the bishop in front of the church in sacrifice and in laying down your life. And in the hopes, in all the holy orders, in the diaconate, in the priesthood, and then in the episcopacy, it's this communication of the person of Christ. We talk about the priest standing in persona Christi, in the person of Christ. It is no longer you, which is the beauty of the vestments. That there's no, I don't come and show off whatever it is that my latest clothes or whatever. It's the vestments. It's the robes of Christ. It is the sacrifice of one's own self, one's own life. Marriage, matrimony, the sacrament, this sacramental is the pledging of one's life until death. It's a movement into that reconciliation. What is reconciliation but a turning away, a dying to that which is old and turning to that which is new? Each and every one of these sacraments testify to the reality of death. Christianity is a religion that centers around, like virtually every religion, around death. But here's the difference, is that we're not simply united to the death of Christ, but also to his resurrection. And so the life that we now live, I remember when that Baptist preacher took me and he baptized me. This was the second time I was baptized. And he quotes Romans 6, you are baptized into the death of Christ and you are raised to walk in newness of life. We participate not only in his death, but in his resurrection. We talk about the real presence of Holy Communion at the altar. What is the presence when we talk about the flesh of Christ being given to us? It is the resurrected flesh of Christ. There is no other flesh. This is the flesh that's given to us. The life that's given to us by means of all the sacraments is the life of the risen and ascended Christ, which is an important piece, it seems to me. Which leads to this final point where I want to make... I want this to turn, and I hope this doesn't put you off, but I want to turn this last bit to something a little more polemical. And by that I mean I want to push against some things that I've experienced now, having been in the Anglican world, Anglican Communion, for the past 7 years or so as a convert. So I'm not speaking as an expert by any means, but just simple observations of one priest and something that I've seen particularly in this renewal of Orthodox Anglicanism in North America. And I would say it even spreads to the whole missional kind of culture that's arising within this kind of post-evangelical, post-Protestant culture that we are experiencing here in our country. And it's this, and this gets to the title of what I was talking, or what my talk is about. How deep do these waters go? Embracing sacramental absence. Everything I've just said to you is about what sacraments give to you, what's positively there. And this is I think, this is kind of the strength. This is the draw from people who have come from other traditions, is that Anglicans say there's something present. The presence of Christ is there in a very tangible and real, though mysterious way. It's there, and the church communicates it ritually in all these various ways, and we can participate in it. And for those who have been worn out on certain types of emotional fatigue, whether it's through worship or certain forms of spirituality, they long for that objectivity. They long for that the sturdiness that the sacraments can give, the very presence. This is what we're talking about. An outward visible sign of an inward spiritual grace. It's what's given. This is the point. But I want to focus on sacramental absence, because I've come to see that not only do we receive something in sacrament that's very present, but we receive a very particular kind of absence that is, in my mind, extremely important that we grasp this. And I think we all know this, and I'm framing it kind of provocatively on purpose, but I think this is relatively intuitive, but it's important. It's an important point, I think, anyway. Romans 8:24. Somebody would like to read Romans chapter number 8, verse number 24. If you get it, just read away.
For in this hope we were saved, but hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what he already has?
For in this hope we are saved. If some of you have other translations, sometimes that in will actually be by. By hope we are saved. Now, faith, hope, and love have traditionally been understood as what's called the theological virtues. So when we become participants in the body of Christ and we are given the gift of the Spirit gives us faith, hope, and love. Faith is a gift. Love is a gift. We didn't love God, but He first loved us. And hope. These are the theological virtues in classical Christian teaching that the Spirit infuses into believers. Now, there's something about this post-Protestant, post-evangelical culture that meets this Romans 8:24 in my mind in a very interesting way. Evangelicals have which I take to be a large part of what our movement is really driven by and all about. Evangelicals do a lot of things really well. evangelicals historically have been socially conscious. What's happening in the evangelical world, whether it's Anglican or otherwise, with a move towards social issues, whether they be environmental, whether they be in the city or whatever, this is not peculiar to evangelicalism in any stretch. This has been at the heart of evangelical religion and faith, all the way back to the days in Great Britain of those evangelicals in the Church of England. Socially conscious individuals. They are activists. Evangelicals are doers, particularly American evangelicals are activists. They have to be out there. Their faith must be put to practice. It's almost as though everything must pass through the test, the litmus test of what cash value will this actually have in the end? And I don't mean to say literally money, but what's the purchase? What's the real thing? How does this work? It's a very pragmatically oriented, in a good way, faith, that how does this actually work itself out in our life? We even have workshops on baptism that are designed particularly around that question. How do we live out this? What are the results of? This is where we really want to get. Evangelicals are not very comfortable just sitting around filling their head with a bunch of ideas. They want to know, how does this work out? What does this do? What are we supposed to do with our bodies now, out in the world, now that we know this stuff? If it doesn't result in that, then what's the point? What value does it actually have? So not only activism and social consciousness, a social awareness and concern for the larger society, but evangelicals and this post-Protestant culture also have a deep desire for relevance. This can be good and this can be bad, but they want to be, and this is coupled with both of these other pieces, they want to be relevant. And they want to demonstrate that. At times, the evangelical church has some type of, it seems to me, kind of inferiority complex, and we want to prove to the rest of the world that we're not backward, that we're not uneducated, that we really know what we're talking about, and so we want to interact at an academic level. We want to show that we're relevant to the culture, so we're very flexible with forms of worship, even in liturgical settings. We're very flexible and fluid with how we're able to do that, because we want to be able to respond appropriately, how we set up our churches. Very flexible, very wanting to be relevant, and I mean that in the best sense of the term. These are, I would say, good things about evangelical Christianity. But with all of that, and particularly something that I've experienced in maybe in your churches, I don't know, but certainly in the circles that I have been in for the last 7 or 8 years, with the growing social awareness, with increased desires for activists, particularly towards cities, and this desire to be relevant, there can very easily, it doesn't have to be, but there can easily, what can happen is the horizon for what we expect and what we're aiming at as Christians becomes contained within the world. It becomes defined by that which is now. So we begin to find metrics, measurements for ourselves that are contained within this world, within those things that are tangible and reachable and achievable. And we even talk that way. We have the aims and the goals that we have, and even the standards by which we judge ourselves and by which we judge one another is our effectiveness to achieve these particular goals, whether they be social or whatever, in these contexts. Now here's where all this relates for me back to this idea of sacramental absence. That in every sacrament, we are given hope. Hope is something that the Spirit communicates to us. And if we are given hope, hope by definition means something is not here. Something is not yet. That the very presence of this substance, Hebrews 11:1, how many of you memorized Hebrews 11:1? What does it say? Faith is the substance. That word is the same word that in this passage, substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It's a substance of things hoped for. It's the same word that we see for 4 centuries that's debated about the substance, substantia of Jesus. What was the substance of Jesus? It's the same exact word. It's a thing. It's a real substance. It's the tangible material thing. And what the author of Hebrews is saying is that faith is the very substance. It's the stuffness of hope. It brings that which we hope for, which lies beyond death, beyond the grave, somewhere in our futures, and faith grabs it from there and it wrestles it into the present. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. But because it's hope, there's an aspect in which it's not yet. We do pretty well, I think, at a particular kind of spirituality. It's called, and I'm giving you a lot of maybe new words here, and I'm sorry for that, but it's called cataphatic spirituality. Kata is a Greek preposition. It just means according to. There's the idea of this kind of spirituality is that it's very understandable, it's revealed, we get it, we know it, it's reading the scriptures, it's praying, it's tangible, it's something that we can contain in our minds. We move forward, we learn doctrine, we learn these various things about the teachings of the church, about God, about ourselves, and we move forward, we grow in grace and knowledge. There's another kind of spirituality called apophatic, or the negative way. With everything that's given in Christianity, it means that something is withheld. With every presence, there's a necessary absence because we are still here. And that which we shall be has not yet been revealed. But when He shall appear, we shall see Him, and we will be like Him, because we will see Him as He is. For now we know in part, Paul says, but then we shall see face to face. The sacraments communicate to us a very real absence. And this absence comes in the form of hope. And to me, the importance of this is in all of our doing, in all of our talk of activity and movement and growth and planting and relevance and social consciousness and all the rest, there is always a not yet. It is always a knowing and an unknowing. It's always infused with hope. If we lose hope, something has gone wrong. If we think that everything that we are meant to do is actually achievable here, something has gone wrong. We are saved, as Romans 8 said, in hope. Our salvation, in a very real way, is yet to be revealed. 1 Peter chapter number 1, beginning in verse number 3. Now I definitely don't have any internet access up here, so somebody's going to have to read that for me. And I think it's 3 to verse 5. 1 Peter 1, 3 to 5.
Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In His great mercy, He has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time.
We are brought to faith through a living hope by the resurrection of Christ. A living hope. And a salvation that is reserved in heaven for us. And I don't really know what all of the motivation for the plethora of books and studies and devotional materials and sermons and all kinds of things that's wanting to seek to address the kind of rapture culture in evangelical circles. The world's, it's just going to hell, it's all going to burn up, what does it matter? Nothing we do here matters, let's just make it through, everything's going to get worse, and we'll fly away someday, I'll fly away thing. And so there's been this movement, this just swell to say, no, there's all kinds of meaning here. There's all kinds of purpose here. Why would we think that? We don't want to retreat from culture. We don't want to draw back from the world. We actually want to be present in it because we have so much to give. The life of Christ here, all of that. Wonderful stuff. There's all kinds of people doing wonderful work. What I'm saying is, yes, but we are saved in hope. And everything, any imagination that we could come up with, we're in the process of visioning for our church and planning and all of these wonderful things. And we'll see what happens with it. But we're saved in hope. To long. This is a deep, deep question that I'm asking myself. So maybe this is only for me tonight. I don't know. But there, in my own trajectory, in my own spirituality, I found when I came into this tradition, I found a home and a freedom away from some emotional roller coasters, forms of spirituality that demanded from me internal things that I just couldn't give anymore, wore me out. And so to find a church that had some objectivity to it, that I could hold on, that I could be quiet, that God was a real actor in the ritual, in the service, in our life, was refreshing. But I also experienced proportionally that as I became comfortable with that, this sense of hope and longing to pray the Lord's Prayer as though my life depended on it. Not because I just want the kingdom to become present, because I'll be honest with you, the greatest things that I've seen, I don't think it's the kingdom in totality. The best things that happen as a Christian, there's lack in it. There's incompleteness in it. There's frustration mingled in it. There's motives that aren't quite pure that's wrapped up in it. And I realized this, and I've become aware in myself this proportional distance between my comfortability with the objectivity, the sacramentality, what God does, and the diminishment of my own hope. What am I hoping for? Where does my hope actually lie? And I honestly have come to the conclusion, I don't think that any of the commands of Christ, these radical demands of Christ, of turning cheeks and selling possessions, make any sense. We can't make any sense of monastic living without the recognition of this kind of hope. The whole discussion around human sexuality that the church wrestles with and we fight about culturally and all the rest, it takes on completely different complexions in these kinds of light. The discussion changes when hope is set in a different place. When meaning is not, when we can't just close the circle of meaning within our lives as we understand it now. And so what I'm really saying in all of this is that baptism is not only the great gift of the promise of God to us of forgiveness of sin and union with Christ in His death and His resurrection, but it's God giving us a very real and substantive absence. It's not yet. It's not here yet. And we long and we work and we strive, but we use the language of Homo sapiens. We are Homo viator. We are those who are on the way. We are pilgrim man. Those who are on the path. And when we lose this picture in the letter of Hebrews, that there is a city whose builder and maker is God. There is a glory that is yet to be revealed, that every goodness and grace that you receive has built within it a lack. It has built within it something that isn't there, that is meant to draw you on. This is what creation is. Creation is this pointer towards something beyond itself. Sacraments are meant to point beyond themselves. This was the whole debate at the Reformation. Is everything really contained in the bread and wine? Because then it's no longer a sacrament. It's just the body and blood of Christ. The symbol's gone. It's just the thing. Sacraments are meant to push us beyond what is actually there. And it's really an invitation into humility. We don't know. We don't know all kinds of stuff. We fail in all kinds of ways. Our sin sticks to us, and we try to pry its fingers from our skin, and we fail. And we come again, and we think we have victory in certain areas, and it grabs us again. And it's like what Paul says, it clings to us. And if we had our wish, we would do away with it all right now. And those things are reminders, not to, create these loathing and dour kind of people, but they're reminders that it's not all here. It's not all here. Our politics change when we realize it's not all here. And this isn't, and I'm by no means condoning some type of escapism. I'm just offering, in these brief moments, the suggestion that not only is there great sacramental presence, but there's also a deep sacramental absence. And coming back to the title, how deep do these waters go? We find the absence as God takes us deeper and deeper into these waters as we experience and are united to the death of Christ. Paul says in Philippians 3 that he wants and desires and longs to be a sharer in the sufferings of Christ, in order that he may partake in his resurrection as well. How deep do these waters go? That's for us to find out. How deep will we allow God to take us there? If we believe that it's all here, that we can close the circle of meaning and significance and purpose in life, which is another thing that unfortunately is a temptation for us who hold to a sacramental reality, we can turn it into a marketing technique to get people to come to church because we have something that others don't, this mystery. And we can shape it, and I've seen this. We shape it in a way that we have something to give. That's why people want, we're in this great moment that people want what we have because we offer this great presence. True, I agree. But we ought not to forget the great absence that comes with it. We need to be a people that are on the way. We are not there. We will not reach there until Jesus shows his face, until the morning star rises in our own hearts, until the day dawns. We're not going to see. We're not going to fully know as we are known until that day. And so it's a reorientation. So the next time you think about the sacraments, even in the Eucharist, as glorious and as wonderful and as assuring and as blessed as it is, if I were to ask you, if that's all that it was forever, does it satisfy the deepest longings of your heart? It doesn't. What do you want? I assume you want the same thing I want. You want to see. You want to be able to see. It's why I want to read everything I can get my hands on. It's not because I just want to fill my head with facts. It's because I want an author to take me up the mountain to what they've seen so I can see it too. I'm thinking that they've seen something that I haven't seen, and I want to see it. I want to talk to people and understand what their experiences are to be able to see. And I want to be able to even have engaging conversations, to go back with my experience and your experience so I can see. I want to see God. And sacraments allow a little ray of light. But with the ray of light, as the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, entitled one of his books, there's also a ray of darkness, if that can even be conceived. A ray of absence. And so as we approach the sacraments, as you even renew your baptism, don't forget hope. Let hope, this is the engine, I believe, of the church's activity, is hope. It's not because we think we can bring heaven to earth or we can build the kingdom of God on earth. Of course we can't. We've had 2,000 years and we've done wonderful things and we've done horrendous things as Christians, as the church. We've had great presence and we have abysmal absence. But we long for the day that God, you come, that you rend the heavens, that you let justice roll down, that you bring your kingdom to earth, that your will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is our hope, and faith brings it into the present. We taste it, we hear it, we see it, just in glimpses. And so remember humility, And as you come to the sacraments, and as you remember and renew your baptismal vows, perhaps at your Easter Vigil or wherever you may do that every Sunday morning, I don't know how you do that in your churches, remember not only that which God has promised to you in that sacrament, but also what has been held back to draw us. And everything that He gives to us in life works this way. It's a revelation of His presence, and at the very same time, it's a declaration of His absence. And allow the absence not to frustrate us, but to draw us. It's those who hunger and thirst for righteousness that shall be satisfied. I don't want to get full. I don't want it all to be present. I really don't. I want to be hungry. I want to be thirsty. And if we're parched and we're dry and we're starving, we will continue to walk. We will continue to move, as Bunyan says, toward the celestial city. Through all of it, through all the mess and all the torturous aspects of that journey.